And the seconds we start to count down. So excellent.
You don't want me to put the star show then?
It's entirely up to you. I can see the back of your neck, but when your head drops, it's... Okay, with a little bit of shuffling from me. The floor is yours, Samantha.
Okay, well, as Christine said, I'm Samantha, and I'm going to talk to you about a project I kind of do on the side of my academic responsibilities here. My day job is teaching genetics in science. But I'm also part of the Medway Science Centre partnership, a project we have set up to try and deliver a science centre for Kent and Medway, but specifically in the Medway area, if we can manage it. So to talk about the partnership first, it's made up basically of 5 of us, and the story behind the start of this project is that David and Angela, they live in the Medway area and they have a little girl. They're both scientists. Angela now has a publishing and editing business, but she was a scientist, and David works at Imperial College. And they obviously take their daughter to science-related things, but there's nothing in this local area for kids to get engaged with science. So they have to go up to the Science Museum in London or across to Bristol, which I'm going to talk to you about as well. And so over a bottle of wine one evening, they thought, wouldn't it be great if there was something locally? And they talked to a few other people, including me, Katie, who is a maths teacher in the local area, so she comes to this from an education perspective. And Chris Steele works for Kent County Council, so he has a lot of information about what the council's targets and priorities are and what funding they have available. So between the 5 of us, we make quite a good team with quite complementary skills. And before I say any more about the project, how many of you know what I mean when I say a science centre? Maybe? Any thoughts? Okay, it's a bit like the Science Museum, but hands-on. And so at Bristol is a successful and quite a good example of this. I'm just going to show you a short movie to give you a little bit of insight into what they do there. If I can find the movie, guys. So hopefully you can see from that the Science Centre at Bristol and what we envisage here is something that's very interactive, that's engaging people from all different ages, right from primary school up to adults, and that covers all of the different STEM disciplines. Now you can't necessarily cover every aspect of STEM all the time, but at Bristol have some exhibitions that are permanent and some things that they rotate and change over time, so that visitors have different things to see when they come on different occasions. So 20 million adults and children from all backgrounds choose to visit a UK Science Centre or a science museum, and these are just some of the things that science centres offer. So hands-on exhibits, as you saw in the movie, exhibition space and public engagement space to give lectures and talks in the community and also to hold community events, public seminar facilities, CPD, so particularly for teachers teaching science. Some science centres run short courses to help them get up to speed with particular areas of STEM subjects, either that they're not comfortable with or that there's been significant progress with recently. Reach Out Labs is a kind of more formal laboratory space for schools to come in and visit. And also many have kind of sets of equipment that they can also loan out to schools if the schools can't get in to the Reach Out Lab, either because they can't easily travel or because the lab is fully booked. So science centres attract large numbers of people, and Medway has nothing currently like this, so that's part of our thinking behind why we could make a success of this. The Association for Science and Discovery Centres. So together, the UK Science and Discovery Centres delivered 200,000 individual curriculum-linked workshops to 4.3 million school students. 89% of those students said they had an experience which inspired them with science, and 62% felt they wanted to learn more about science as a result of their visit. So this is about engaging the public, it's about educating the public, but it's also about inspiring the next generation of engineers, mathematicians and scientists to learn more about the subject, and some of those will then go on to become the next generation of all of you and me. Many others perhaps won't become professionally scientists or engineers, but scientific literacy is increasingly important in society. Many of the challenges we face, we find technological solutions to, and people who don't have some kind of grounding in the STEM subjects can feel perhaps excluded. So why Medway? There are 4 universities here, obviously Greenwich, Kent, Canterbury, Christchurch, and the University of Creative Arts in Rochester. A strong STEM heritage, particularly in engineering, so we have the dockyards across the road, which there is in this area still local modern dock facilities. There's also the boat building yards, which have been historically very important. So this area has always had a lot of STEM going on here, and you may know that in Kent there's been a lot of big pharmaceutical science companies. Some of those have moved some of their facilities elsewhere, but there's still a lot of small and medium enterprise companies, and Pfizer is still in Sandwich. So the local area both has a history of employing STEM graduates, and it also still has a need to fulfill. And a lot of that talent comes from elsewhere. They recruit people from outside Medway to come into the area and work, whereas the councils, and we think we can contribute to this, want to raise aspiration locally and encourage more local people to go into those kind of markets. We also have a large population here in Medway that's geographically accessible, so trains to London are easy, A2 is easy. You can get to Medway either from Kent and Sussex or the rest of the southeast pretty easily by road or rail. It's a low aspiration area, and it's relatively deprived going from government statistics. So that's part of why both Kent and Medway have targets and priorities about raising aspiration and raising educational levels in the local area. So Medway councils own statement is they have a commitment to turn Medway into a place of learning, culture, tourism and enterprise by 2026, and we think we can tap into the funds they have to do this, which are not vast, but also contribute to delivering that. So they obviously see this kind of project both as helping to inspire and raise aspiration in the local area, but also to provide tourism, culture and some jobs, although again not a huge number. So what are our plans? Well, we have done a feasibility study. We're still in the process of looking at that. And that was done in collaboration with all three of these people. So at Bristol are working with us. They have a guy called Harry White, and his niche job is that all over the world he helps people who want to set up their own science museums, look at how feasible that is, come up with a delivery plan, and well, he doesn't help you to find funding, but he'll help to think about potential sources of funding. The National HE STEM programme, they fund projects that get higher education institutions involved in delivering kind of STEM outreach, and so they have provided us with some funds to get started. And Excitec are the Reach Out Lab at Imperial College. So Imperial have set up this, it's just a Reach Out Lab. It's within their college. But it's a dedicated schools lab, and they have a lot of schools. They're pretty much fully booked all the time. And so they set up this small company both to run that lab and to make sure they were exploiting it as much as they could. So all of them have provided support, and Excitec provides some mentoring to us about possible ideas they might have that they haven't thought of. So moving on from working out whether we can really whether this is feasible, we need to find funding. We need to formalise our partnership. At the moment, we exist just because we say we exist. We're not a legal entity. I hold the budgets for the funding we have as an academic here at the university, so it counts essentially as one of my research projects. And then working with the councils, we need to develop a delivery plan. Now, of course, there's a bit of a loop here, because your delivery plan will depend on what funding you have available. If someone says to you, this is a great project, have £2 million, then you can set this up in a very big way at the beginning. Whereas if you can't get much money, you maybe have to start something smaller and grow with time. So the funding you have affects your delivery plan, and also your delivery plan affects what funding you would go looking for. So it's good to develop an initial sense of what you want to achieve, and then go looking for the money, and then obviously you go around that loop again and say, well, okay, we went looking for £2 million, but actually we've only got 500,000, so let's adapt that plan. Then once you have a plan, you need further big capital funding, which really ties in with this. I mean, you can find one big source of funds, or most science centres are funded by a whole group of different stakeholders who all want different things and who contribute greater or lesser amounts of money. And then obviously to open our science centre. So I mentioned funding. At Bristol, and some initial maths we've done have suggested, depending on the size of the organisation we want to open initially, that we might be looking in the region of £1 million start-up and then £650,000 per year. Science centres do not make money. Nowhere in the world are they profitable, with the possible exception of the NASA place in America. I don't know what their budget's like. At Bristol, have a very large car park in a very useful part of Bristol, and so their shortfall is made up from that. Techniquest in Wales, they receive a large grant from the Welsh Government every year because in addition to their main site, they run a subsidiary site which provides outreach to rural areas of Wales which don't otherwise have access to these kind of facilities. So different people approach this annual sum that you need to keep going in different ways. Obviously you can have admission fees and you would charge schools who use your facilities, but it's rarely possible to have enough people and or to charge them a high enough amount that you can get all of your costs that way. In terms of start-up money, one possibility for us is the Reaching Communities England Fund, which is part of the big lottery fund. They will provide up to £500,000 for the right project. We haven't applied yet, but it's one possibility. Industry, I mentioned before, there's quite a lot of STEM-related industry in the area. They all have social corporate responsibility, or at least the bigger organisations have social corporate responsibility funds. And they also have a PR job to do. Places like the power station need to interact with the local community to be seen not as the bad guys. Obviously, universities, we use some of our outreach activities, large parts of our outreach activities, not just from a sense of social responsibility, but because we want to recruit these students in future. And so universities have marketing and recruitment budgets and already do pay for some outreach, so they will also hopefully contribute. And then, as I said, Medway and Kent County Councils, they have their own targets and obligations, and we feel we can meet some of those priorities, then we may also be able to convince them to hand over a share of those funds. So in terms of our delivery plan, one possibility for us is the pump house over at Dockside. It's, I was going to say Victorian, I don't actually know. It's old, it's listed, it's very pretty, and it has a STEM heritage because it was a pump house. And in fact, you'll see that there is still some of the machinery on the inside, which we could either take away or make it pretty and make it part of the attraction of the place. At the moment, this is pretty much just a shell. It has had a new roof. I believe it's structurally sound. I don't know any more than the details of that. I know Cedar put a new roof on it, and, well, at least if I was an engineer, I wouldn't put a roof on a building that I thought was going to fall down. But I leave you to investigate that. So this is a possibility. We're not the only people interested in this building, and we may lose it to somebody who will pay more than us, but it's a building we would very much like if we can come up with a suitable plan about how we could convert it and how expensive that would cost. Obviously, being over at Dockyard, we then can work with them as a sort of joint project, offering either tickets to both or at least capitalising on having footfall to both of them. So the kind of things we want to put within this space, we need exhibition space, and that needs to be interactive space, so you need to be able to move around it. We want Reach Out Lab or teaching facilities for schools to come in and use. We need meeting rooms, conference or seminar space for us to run CPD activities or community activities. A cafe or restaurant is always a good idea. If people are coming, they need to eat and drink. It also can be a good source of revenue. We need a reception area where people can buy tickets, ask questions, report they've lost their child, which hopefully won't happen, etc. Offices, because somebody has to run the organisation, they need to be on site or at least close by. And obviously things like toilets. There may be other practical things I've missed out, but that's kind of what we are thinking we need to see. There's quite a few people scribbling, so I'm just going to give you a moment to finish. Okay, so this is the project. These are all the ways we can be reached. So at the moment we have a Facebook group and a Twitter group where we're just trying to generate some interest, keep people posted about what's going on. And we also, of course, have an email address. And You can also get in touch with me personally. I'm also on Twitter. I'm here at the university, so finding my email address should be easy. This is my office phone number, and I've given you my mobile because I'm not always on site, so sometimes that can be a more useful way to get hold of me. Obviously, don't call at 1 o'clock in the morning, but otherwise, if you have questions, you're welcome to get in touch. So, that's it. Questions, thoughts?
So have you only got the one building that you've got in mind at the moment?
At the moment, yes. So other possibilities would be things like a planning, section 106. I know there is redevelopment planned in the area, and so we could ask to be made part of the social side of that. But this is, yeah, I mean, it's not that they'll necessarily get it, but it's the one building that we think would look good, is be in a good location and suit us.
Do you need all the space inside that building?
Sorry?
Do you need all the space inside it? Have you got a plan of how big you want things in there?
Just based on walking around, and I have no experience of kind of blue, we haven't done any drawings and measured anything. I would say between all those things, you would probably need all of it. But my feeling is you could fit it all in.
You've got a huge floor-to-ceiling height, so it gives you lots of potential. You'll see it next week. It'll give you lots of potential.
What's the current situation? It's being marketed at the moment, isn't it?
It is, yes, and they have someone who's interested. So
Yeah.
we
For
are...
it's got planning consent for
Yeah, it does for leisure and weddings.
Yeah.
It's had that for a long time and no one was interested, and we talked about maybe trying to rent it from them, but I believe, I don't know who it is they're negotiating with, but I believe that person is looking to buy it, and that might be preferable for, I forget who's inherited this from Cedar.
HCA?
Yes, I think so, yeah, communities.
Yeah. Agency,
Yeah, them. So if they can get more money for it and get it off their hands, I suspect they would like that option. But time will tell whether those negotiations...
You'd like to think that your concept ties in more to what, you know.
What's there already.
Yeah.
Hmm. That would be our argument.
You might have said already about car parking, but does the pump house have enough car parking facilities?
It doesn't have much car parking facilities of its own, but you have got there is quite a lot of car parking space at the broader site, because there's the shopping centre there and also the dockyard and Dickens World and all of those kind of things. So, I mean, this is cheeky because we haven't discussed it with anyone, but obviously our thought is that we can just share parking there.
Have you had any, so you've got a funding estimate of 1 million, have you had any confirmed yet?
No, we're still going between various people talking about what we might deliver, how that might work, and that's kind of how your projects can feed into this in terms of giving us, you know, more ideas and
So
yeah,
but
something.
you still have offers on the table sort of thing, or not?
No, it's all just,
It's up to
nobody
you.
talks actual sums to begin with. You just go to people and say, we want to do this, and they say, yeah, that would be good. We have a budget. We might give you something. We haven't got as far as actual amounts yet.
You mentioned about old machinery in the building. Do you have any thoughts on when using this building for the public and the science centre to maybe use those pieces of machinery for the old heritage of the building, or are you just?
It could be nice to do that. It does take up quite a bit of space, and it does look a bit of a wreck at the moment. If you could do something with it to make a nice feature of it and illustrate the heritage of the building properly, that would be good. Otherwise, you could take it away and put in a model, depending on your space requirements and everything else. I don't think the machinery there is dangerous in any way. It's just set into the ground. So it's not something that could fall over or you could fall into or any of those kind of issues.
What kind of role do you all play in the partnership? Is it, do you all have equal share, or is there?
Yes. Yeah, so we all bring slightly different in terms of what aspects of the project we're involved with, you know, what we primarily do, but we all just talk about it amongst ourselves, and yes, we're kind of equal partners.
I've got a question for you. Given you said, and we know, that science centres don't make money, they are effectively charitable, or they could have charitable status, and therefore a profit is never part of the rationale. You and your partnership, albeit informal at the moment, you're not legally bound, but one presumes you would have to be were this to proceed properly and to get some level of funding. You would have to employ people, I'm guessing, to run.
Yes, absolutely.
So, would you, as an entity, you and your partners, would you become a company in order to employ people, or how do you see that progressing, or is that so far for the future?
It's something that we're beginning to talk about, and Medway CVS offer advice to people trying to start up about what your different options are in terms of becoming a legal entity. I think we will have to become some kind of business, or at least an organisation capable of employing people. I think if we always were to work through a third party, that would cause, well, it has potential for conflict, and
certainly because they want to be paid, wouldn't they? So,
yes.
Yeah.
So how we envisage it is that we would be an organisation, and we will hire people and run things and make the decisions, and then we would have a steering board, which we would have people who were stakeholders and had an interest in the project. So for instance, if universities, obviously there's potential here for the Medway Science Centre, brought to you with the University of Greenwich, big logo in the opening area, that could be useful for the university. They would then, we would expect them to contribute financially, and we would probably offer them a place on the steering group as part of that, but they wouldn't have they would have influence rather than actual legal control over anything. That's how we see it working.
And no one's ever been to a science centre? Into
I
a
think
science
so.
museum? Yeah.
Is it a bit like the basement downstairs? There's like in London one. Have you ever seen that?
I have, and the basement's quite interactive,
Yeah, that's
isn't
what I
it?
sort of-
Yeah, I mean the Science Museum, of course, they started out as a very traditional, old-fashioned museum with things you've looked at and read about, but they've become over the years more and more hands-on, and they're kind of halfway now between a Science Museum and a Science Centre.
There's all sorts of links and so many things you can bring into play with this, because as we've identified, it's a listed building, but it's a science centre, it's on the river, all those things to do with the environment, sustainability. There's so many hooks and things you can bring into this project. It's why, once I was aware that Samantha was involved in this project, I've used her, this is the second time I've used her as client, because I think in the first instance, as a project, it's really, really interesting. It's real, it's live, it's educational, so obviously if there's a link to the university, science, sustainability, all those things that you have to think about, and then we layer on top of that the building. Now obviously that's subjective, you've got the constraints of a listed building. My personal view as a structure, I really like it. I quite like it when we have a visit, because I could just, it is just not one big void and empty space, but I just quite like it as the space. I can think of all sorts of other uses for that building, but at the moment Samantha's looking at a science centre. Just to reference some of the things we have talked about before, and I'm trying not to stand in front of the camera. I've seen myself before, thank you very much. What do I suggest to you are, I give you 3 criteria for a successful project. Can you remember what they are?
Time question.
No, they're the criteria in terms of they're the client
Okay.
requirements, which is potentially what Samantha would want when the project's underway. What are the 3 criteria for a successful project?
Fitness for purpose.